So I know that we're only like 3 months into this little experiment that we call a TBR game on my channel, but I'm actually quite impressed with the results of how many books I am actually reading from my TBR. Hello my lovely friends, it's Margaret. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about every book that I read in the month of March. As I mentioned before the title, I feel like I am actually kind of sticking to what I say I'm going to read a little bit. Like, it's not 100%, because I'm also leaving myself some wiggle room in case I want to do something else, in case I have other readathons and other stuff that comes up. But I do feel like I'm much more focused in what I'm reading and where I'm going with this, and that is what the goal was for this whole thing. So in the month of March, I read 8 books. 3 of those were contemporaries, 1 was historical fiction, 2 were fantasy, and 1 was a sci-fi. And then I got 1 5-star, 4 4-stars, and 3 3-stars as far as ratings go. So pretty good reading month overall. 90%, most of the books, I'm not entirely sure on the percentage when you take 8 out of 7, but most of the books that I read I enjoyed and did not make me want to set anything on fire. This first book that I finished in the month of March was a super cute little YA romance, and that is XOXO by XOXO. This is about Jenny, and she ends up going over to Korea along with her mom because her mom's going to take care of Jenny's grandmother, grandma's sick, yada yada yada. Jenny is like, there's this prestigious art school over there, why don't I just go with you? I'll be able to spend some time with Harmony, and you know, I'll still be on track for what I'm wanting to do with my career, because she is a cellist, so she's trying to like get an actual job being a cellist, which is very hard to do. Very, very hard to do. So I love this. I really liked Jenny as a character and kind of the arc that she ends up having to go through. There's a lot going on for her. It's not just about the romance. There is some family stuff that she is dealing with. There's some stuff that she's trying to piece together between her mom and her grandmother. She's trying to figure out like what their relationship is because they haven't spoken in many, many years. So this is her first time there. This is her first time, you know, getting to spend time with her grandmother. She also wants to spend time with her mom. She also has some friends that she makes at this new music school. One of the things that she is dealing with is that she's gotten a bad, like not a bad mark, but they're like, technically it's perfect, but there's no spark in the way that Jenny plays. And she's like, how am I supposed to do that? And she decides she's going to just go seize life. And she ends up getting caught up with this boy that is a K-pop star. That's something you need to know, is she ends up meeting a K-pop star, challenging him to a karaoke battle, doesn't realize at the moment who she's challenging, and then when she goes over to Korea, he is at her school. And they kind of hit it off. They really like each other. You kind of see a friendship building, but he has to be careful because he's not supposed to be dating. I really enjoyed watching Jenny develop her relationship, not just with Jaewoo, but also with the friends that she meets at this school. One of the things that she's dealing with is she doesn't have much of a life outside of playing the cello, and so she decides that that's part of what she's going to do. She's going to get friends and all of this stuff. So I really liked a lot of the stuff that it tackles in regards to high school for someone who is trying to do what she's trying to do. The romance is there to be fun, but the book really is looking at the relationships that we have with friends and family. And one of the things that I like, because like the characters that she becomes friends with, they're pretty well fleshed out. They're people that like you're always looking forward to seeing them in the scenes. You want to know more about them. And she also, like, even though Jenny kind of gets caught up at one point in this relationship, the book doesn't forget that she has friends. Because you'll have some romances like this where like the relationship will start and all of a sudden the friends are like dropped off the face of the earth, like the author forgot. But you can really tell the author is like, nope, they're still here. And she makes sure that their presence is known, and part of the plot revolves around kind of trying to find that balance. And I really liked that. This is one of the books that I ended up reading for Koreadathon. It was to cover the prompt of read a book about a Korean diaspora character. Also for Koreadathon, I read Kim Jiyoung, born in 1982 by Cho Nam-ju. This is about Kim Jiyoung, and it's just this short little book about what happens after she has her first child. Basically, she has, at the very beginning of the book, she kind of has some sort of mental break. She is pretending to be different women, or at least her husband thinks she's pretending to be different women that they've known in their lives. And it's really interesting because you can kind of tell really quickly that she is using, like, these personas are letting her verbalize feelings that she doesn't feel safe verbalizing as herself. That's apparent from the very beginning of the book. And then what happens is she gets sent to therapy, and the rest of this book is her narrating her life to the therapist. So it's written like this is the therapist's notes or the psychologist's notes of what she's telling him, and he's kind of writing it all up as a final summary and then all of that. It was an intriguing format for fiction because like there are footnotes so that you can look things up that end up being brought up in this narrative, and I liked that. The author definitely set out to make this feel very clinical and very much like someone watching from the outside as this woman tells her story, and I think she succeeded beautifully in doing that. I really liked how this talked about the expectations put on women, about how careers get affected by women having families, or women are affected by their careers and wanting to have a family, and all of that. I think a lot of people would sit there and read this and go, well, yeah, but that's in South Korea. There are some specific cultural differences, obviously, but like there are so many just lines that can be drawn between what the expectations are on women after they get married and when it comes to having a family and careers and all of that stuff. This ended up being the book that I used to cover the prompt read a book translated from Korean, and then also read a book recommended by a Korean celebrity. And then my final read, well, not my final read, but the final thing that I finished during Koreadathon was Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. This is complicated to explain without spoiling things, so I'm just going to give you like the bare bones. So it's about a family, and it follows them through immigrating from Korea to Japan and how they build their lives in Japan and the different struggles that they face, and it follows several generations of this family. There's a lot that goes on here. I will say that this is a dark book. There is a trigger warning for suicide. I will try and find those pages and link them in the description box. There's also a trigger warning for violence against women, assault, those kinds of things. But it also is a very, not just like it's an informative read, it's an engaging read. Like I'm not mad, it's sad. It's sad as can be, but I'm not mad I read it. So far I've given all the books that we've talked about 4 stars. I ended up like really enjoying this. It's one that I've been meaning to get to for the longest time. I think it has been on every Koreadathon TBR that I have made, and I've never been able to get the audiobook from my library because I always forget about it until right at the last minute, and then somehow I managed to get it this time, so I was like, go. I thought that the writing in this was fantastic. Min-Jin Lee is able to draw the reader in very, like, just so slowly, like you're being reeled in. She starts with like what is our main character's mother and kind of builds what her life is like before introducing Sunja, and she does such a good job of like you're being drawn into this woman's life, but you also know that this is preparation for like we're building to something. The author starts out with the main character's Sunja's mother, and you as the reader can feel her building towards when this character comes into the world, onto the page, and then you are following her throughout most of her life, and then through following her you are also seeing her children and her children's children, and the way that Min-Jin Lee is able to transition between main characters, like you don't even realize the main character has moved on to the next person. Sunja is just such an integral part of this story that you don't miss her when the focus shifts to the next generation. I also found it really interesting to be learning about what is a little known part of Japanese history. This takes place from like a little bit before World War II and then follows it all the way up to the present day. And it really examines the imperialist tendencies in Japan. Japan did end up taking over Korea at one point in history, and this is following a lot of what is going on in this book is the impact of that decision by the Japanese government to come and take over Korea. This gives you a really interesting, nuanced picture of what's going on about that part of history, because I think a lot of us know about like the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We know here in the United States, we know about like their effect, like our effect on them in World War II, and we don't know, like we don't think about the effect that they had on people around them. That's not to say that anyone deserved anything. It's just like interesting to see, like a lot of the time when you look at history, there are no real good guys. But it is interesting to see where the focus ends up being when you are looking at it from your own country's point of view versus another country's point of view. This ended up fulfilling the prompt to read an award-winning novel by a Korean author, and it also fulfilled a Fablen prompt where I needed to be reading a book that was like a movie or TV show was based upon it. And then I actually did in fact complete my Koreadathon TBR. I just didn't finish it in that week. I also read Winter in Sokcho by Elisa Shua Dusapan. This is about a woman who she works in Sokcho, and it takes place over the winter where the tourist season kind of has died down. And a French cartoonist comes over, like he's there looking for the answer, like trying to get inspiration for his next graphic novel. And so she ends up kind of showing him around Sokcho, and it's about their kind of the relationship that builds between them. And it was a little weird. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I thought it was interesting. I thought that it was very real and raw and in the moment, and if you like that kind of vibe, I think this will be a very good book for you. I just found it a little bit, like, I wanted a little bit more from it. This was the group book for Readathon, and then I also used it to complete the Winter at the Tavern prompt for Fablen, which was to read a book for another readathon or reading challenge. The next one is a whopper, and that is A Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. This is about Althea, and she is part of a live ship trader family. And the way that the live ships work is they end up being bought and brought into different families, and that family cares for them over several generations, and each captain in each generation, like there's a whole ceremony thing where they'll go to die on the deck of the ship, because once you've had a certain number of generations, the ship quickens, which basically means it comes alive, and suddenly you have a ship that can communicate with you and things. I ended up giving this 3 stars because I liked parts of it, and then there were parts of it that I was not happy about. I think I have the vlog up for this one. There was a character in here that I really, really hated, and I hated the fact that they were a point of view character, and I wanted to set them on fire. I was so done with them by the end of the book. So I really like Robin Hobb's writing style. I like the way that she builds characters and draws you into stories. I think she is so good at creating fantasy worlds. However, there was some stuff in this book that I was just like, but it could have been a stronger book without this, methinks. Granted, like, the characters that I hated the most, there's 2 of them, Kenneth and Kyle, and I just wanted both of them chucked off the ship. They are so misogynistic. They are so just, like, self-absorbed and abusive and, like, just, like, terrible, like, scum. That's what they are. They are scum. And I really, like, Kyle I could tolerate to some extent, sort of, because we were not in his head as much, but Kenneth is a main point of view character, and I was just like, you're taking me from somewhere where I am very invested in this character, and you're putting me in the head of this gross dude, and I don't like it. And so it was a very hard book for me to read. I think this is one that if I end up liking the series as a whole, and I come back and I understand the meaning behind some of the other stuff, I may enjoy this more, just especially if I know what's coming to them, and like I can just be gleeful in my anticipation of their deaths. That could work. The other thing is, we have an entire point of view that I'm just like, it is not apparent how this is connected, so why is there so much of it? Like, that was my question for a lot of it, because I think that this could have been tightened up a little bit in editing by, number one, like, cutting the amount of time we have with Kenneth in half. Like, some of Kenneth's storyline is really important for where we get to at the end, and you need to know that, but not all of it is. And then there was that other point of view that I was just like, do we need to check in with this as often as we are? Because it's not, you kind of go into it almost, like, you could tell pretty quickly that this is not something that's going to be resolved in this book, so I wish she had maybe done a little bit less of that again, because what's happening there is not, it's always the same thing. It's always exactly the same thing in that point of view, because of the nature of it. Basically, we just didn't need to be checking in with that point of view as often as we were. This book did feel, and this is probably partly because I was suffering during all of Kenneth's chapters, but this book felt way too long. I enjoyed parts of it. I'm excited to see what happens in the second book. I am concerned about some of the choices that characters made at the end of this book, and yeah, we'll see what happens and if my feelings on any of these characters change. This did end up fulfilling the Finding the Wizard's Ring prompt for Fablen, which was to read a book with jewelry on the cover. Moving on, we get into Vaultathon. The Vaultathon group book this time around was Fruit of the Drunken Tree by Ingrid Rojas Contreras. I gave this 3 stars. I really enjoyed it. This fulfills all of the Vaultathon prompts. Specifically, I think for this one, I was doing 2 characters from completely different backgrounds, and then a book by a South American author. So this was good. It just had a few weaknesses, and I think maybe it needed a little bit more. So a lot of this is based on the author's own life. It's about 2 girls growing up in Bogota, Colombia during the time when Pablo Escobar was doing a lot of stuff. They're also having to contend with a lot of the guerrillas that are coming in and just kidnapping people. And so these two girls, one of them, her family is kind of middle class. Her name is Chula. She's our main character. And then you also have Petrona, who comes, she lives in these places called invasions, and they're basically slums. Petrona ends up getting brought into Chula's house as a servant. She's kind of sort of a live-in maid. I was kind of unclear on that part because she had her own room, but she often did not spend the night at their house. It's very like slice of life. We start with Chula when she's 7 and we follow her until she's 9, and it's just going over a lot of the stuff that she observed. And as adults reading this book, you can kind of see what she's observing, but you also very much get the sense that because she's a child, she doesn't know what's going on. That was done so well, in my opinion. I do think we could have used a little bit more, like, because it did go back and forth between like the author or the narrator telling you about their life when they were 7, and then also the 7-year-old's thoughts. I feel like if we had kind of pulled back and kept it completely in, like, this is me telling you what my life was like at 7, I think that would have made things a little bit more cohesive. I also think that we needed a little bit more, because it was very hard to see what, like, feel the passage of time, because so much of this book just feels like one long day, and maybe that's something that's intentional on the author's part. I do think that, like, the author got very caught up in the style that they were trying to do. The author got very caught up in being accurate to their experience, that they kind of lost the thread of whether or not this was a well-crafted story, if that makes sense. Because I think there are a lot of really good pieces there. There's just little things that make it a little bit more, like, a little bit harder to follow the narrative. I think we could have done with a much more shortened timeline. I don't think we needed the full 2 years. I think if we just done from 8 to 9 and done the exact same events in a much shorter time period with a little bit more to ground the reader in what was happening when and the passage of time, I think that this could have been, like, so much better as a narrative. It's definitely a heavy book. There is a lot that happens. Also a huge trigger warning for on-page sexual assault. Just know that happens. I will again try and give you page numbers down in the description box if you want to skip that particular part. This was also a Fablen book, and it ended up fulfilling the prompt to read a book that was similar to the last book. Shapeshifting 101. Read a book that was similar to the last book that you read. So this is a historical fiction. The last book I'd read at the time was Force of Stolen Girls, which is also a historical fiction. And then we have Nocturna by Maya Motain. I ended up giving this 4 stars. This is a YA fantasy. It is set, honestly, I don't even know where it's set, because that is not important whatsoever. Honestly, who even... It is set in the city of San Cristobal. It's about Finn and Alfie. Finn is a thief. She has a face-stealing magic. She actually doesn't really wear her own face, like, ever. And she's got a lot of baggage. Just a lot of stuff that has happened. And then we have Alfie. He is the prince, and recently he has lost his older brother, and he's just come back from a quest to kind of figure out how to bring his brother back. Because of the way that his brother died, he does think that he can't be brought back from the dead. Basically, things happen, and they end up being the ones that have to take down a very dark magic that they accidentally end up releasing, or Alfie accidentally ends up releasing, and Finn's like, well, I was here when you did this, and I don't like, this is scary, and I don't want to die, so I will help you fix this thing because I'm the only other person that knows it has happened. I really liked this. I really liked the build between Finn and Alfie. It's very much like a, they become friends with feelings, and they don't really recognize their feelings till we get towards, it doesn't even happen until the very, very end of the book for reasons. And I really liked that very slow build between the two of them. It really has me ready for the next book. I'm just like, please. I wish I had time to read that right now. I have been putting this off for so long, and I don't regret it because I've read other good books, but at the same time, I've been putting this off for so long, and it was really, really good. And I wish I'd gotten to it sooner. Don't know how I would have gotten to it sooner. I wish I had. This had a really interesting magic system where everyone has their own proprio, and nobody's, no two proprios are really exactly the same, it seems. And there's also, another magic that you can, there's, the personal magic, and then there's, just, what they call desk magic that you can learn to do as well, that Alfie knows how to do a lot of. I think this does a very good job of looking at grief and trauma and responsibility, because they're both dealing with well, Alfie is dealing with a lot of grief, and he's having to deal with his responsibility now as suddenly being the one who is going to inherit the crown. And then we have Finn, who is just dealing with the trauma of her childhood and trying to escape her childhood. I thought the characters were great. I thought they were really well fleshed out. There's not a huge cast, but the ones that we do spend a time with, you can tell the author has put a lot of thought and knows them much better than we get to see. Like, there are just little things about them that make them feel more real. And I also loved how things end up connecting at the end, and the way that the specific problem ends up being solved. Like, you need to go with it for a minute because you don't get the explanation until a few pages later, but like, the way that that was set up from the beginning and then carries through to the end, I really liked that. And then the final book that I read in March was Persepolis Rising by James S.A. Corey. This is the 7th book in the Expanse series. I've been putting it off, and I shouldn't have been as stressed as I was. This is the 7th book in a 9-book series, and I can't really tell you a lot about what is going on in this particular book, but just it is continuing to follow the crew of the Rocinante that we meet in Leviathan Wakes, and it is following them throughout all of their adventures, and we are continuing to deal with the after effects and the fallout from the proto-molecule. I really appreciate how James S.A. Corey is always able to bring in the proto-molecule in a different way. Like, it's always like, here it is again, doing stuff, causing problems, but it's different than the problems that we had the last time, and now we have to figure out what to do with this problem. It's just really well done. The way that they have built up to this final trilogy and the things that are happening in this book, like, masterful writing. It is just like a masterclass in a long series and building towards a specific end. I love the plot. I love the character arcs. I really love the fact that, like, we have a character in here that something happens to them, and this is a character that you are introduced to pretty early on in the series, and you don't like them when you're introduced to them, and yet they have done such a good job of humanizing this character and making this character a part of what's going on in the story that you go, like, you're sad when the thing that happens to them happens to them. That is just, it's such an interesting kind of redemption arc that this character goes through, and it is done so well. Even though the character is allowed to continue on with their life, they still are bearing the consequences of their choices in previous books, and having to deal with that and having to deal with the weight of what they have done. And I think that is handled really, I think that is handled really well. The angst in this book, because of things that happen in this book. Also, I love Naomi. She is such a fantastic character, and I really feel like she is going to get her moment in this final kind of trilogy that wraps up the series, and I am so ready for that. I am so excited to see what she is going to do, considering where we end this book at. I'm so here for it. Just the way that things are coming together and everything is happening. And I'm a little stressed now, but I'm also hoping that maybe there will be an okay resolution and it won't completely break my heart when we get to Leviathan Falls. I'm so concerned. So concerned. I'm okay. It's fine. I'm fine. I get way too attached to fictional characters, guys. This ended up fulfilling a Fablen prompt, which was helping out at the family business, which was to read a book that is about family. Time for favorite and least favorite. Obviously, the least favorite. You guys are... Is it any surprise? It's Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. I will reiterate, this is by no means a bad book. I just hated parts of it with a burning passion. I was so, it made me so angry, and not in a, like, I want to, like, take over the world kind of way, and more in a, I want to burn the entire world down kind of way. And then just solely, obviously, by the fact that this is the only 5-star that I had this month, this is my favorite book of the month of March. Now that y'all know what my favorite and least favorite book for March were, I would like to know what your favorite and or least favorite book of the month was this last month. So leave that in the comments if you're feeling chatty. If you are not feeling chatty, go ahead and leave me a let's say a spaceship emoji, because the last book I talked about was Persepolis Rising. We'll keep things in easy because I filmed 4 videos today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, if you enjoyed this video, I will have other videos over here. I'll have my Leviathan Wakes review up here just in case you're interested and I want you to read it. I want you to read it. That's actually what it is. I want you to watch the video and then go read the book, and then whatever is newest on my channel will be down here. That is it for now, my friends. Happy reading, and I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye!